Welcome to the Entre Talk podcast. We are your hosts, Toy Hirschman and
Laura McCall.
Join us as we dive into incredible stories from inspiring entrepreneurs around the world.
Whether you are an educator looking for ideas to engage students, a new learner, or someone who wants to be inspired, our guest journeys and their ideas will give you resources to create value and take your own leap into entrepreneurship.
We are so looking forward to sharing our message with you. And don't forget to like, rate, and subscribe to the Entre Talk podcast on whatever platform you listen.
Welcome, and thank you again for joining us for another Entre Talk podcast. I'm so happy today to be here with Erik Wells. I'm Laura McCall, your host. To say that Erik's background is diverse is a bit of an understatement. Born in California, later raised in Pennsylvania, he made his way to West Virginia following his graduation from St. Vincent College in Latrobe, Pennsylvania. He started his career in broadcast journalism at WDTV in Clarksburg, West Virginia as a reporter and later the morning news anchor. Erik moved on to WCHS TV in Charleston, where he would become anchor of the morning show with his wife, Natalie Tennant. The couple's final move in television took place at WBOY-TV. That's where their lives took a turn. In 2004, Natalie decided to run for Secretary of State. The TV station said, okay, Erik could stay on to continue his work at the station. Then 3 days later, the TV station came back and said, either both of you stay or both go. With 2 mortgages and a 2-year-old daughter, they decided to leave. Erik tried to get another job, but it was difficult. So what does someone do when you can't find another job? You run for Congress. Natalie lost her primary for Secretary of State in 2004, and Erik went on to win his primary race, but later lost in the general election. Even losing, they both did well. In 2006, Erik went on to serve in the West Virginia State Senate. He served 2 terms where he chaired the Committee on the Military, was vice chair also of the Committee on Education. In 2008, Natalie was elected West Virginia's 29th Secretary of State and served 8 years. In addition to his service to West Virginia, Erik has been a member of the Navy Reserve since May 2001. He's a public affairs officer who has deployed to Afghanistan, Africa, and Southeast Asia during his nearly 20 years of service. Erik and his family live in Charleston, West Virginia, where he runs Wells Media Group, LLC, a public relations, marketing, and advertising firm. His latest venture is the creation of Exploring West Virginia, a website promoting the state, and I can't wait to talk about that as a former West Virginian. Welcome, Erik. So happy to have you here.
Oh, it's great to be here, Laura. Thank you so much for the invitation.
You're welcome. So Erik and I are somewhat friends from LinkedIn and business connections, and our daughters cross paths, so it's a lot of fun to talk to someone with some similar interests. Erik, you have, I would describe, a varied but also fun career path. But before we would dive into it, I do want to seriously thank you for your service to the Navy. I know that's not always easy. So again, we appreciate that. Tell us about your entrepreneurial journey and how you got to where you are today.
Well, it really does go back to when Natalie and I were at the TV station and she decided that she wanted to run for Secretary of State. So, from that standpoint, you realize that your career and your livelihood is really at the hands of somebody else. And they can change their decision on what they want to do because they're the ones in control. And that taught me the lesson that if you really want to have control of your own destiny, you really need to be the one making the decisions and being the driver of your car down the road to the future. So after we were leaving or let go, and that's a long story, but in essence, we had this agreement that we could stay at the TV station, I could stay, and then it was a hardball tactic to get us to both stay, and we decided that it was time for us to leave. And I did end up running for Congress at that point, and that was a great experience, and that really did catapult me into running for the state Senate 2 years later. But to your question specifically, I always had the idea of having my own business. And the idea of Wells Media Group actually came to me years earlier. And I thought there's things that I could actually provide to clients that would be beneficial just from my experience. But after the 2004 election and we were both without jobs, that's when we started Wells Media Group. And I would venture to say in some respects it was successful and has been. Others it has not been, because anybody who goes into the entrepreneurial world, particularly when you go on your own, everything is on your shoulders.
Mhm.
It's not like you have a large company that if you step out, other people can pick it up for you. So that wasn't the case with us. So over those, from 2004 to the current year, the attention that we've had on it has not been 100%. I served 8 years in the legislature during that time period. So when that happens, I fortunate enough that the legislature meets in Charleston. That's where I live. So after the session, I could run home and run to the office and do some of the work for clients. But then once I deployed, you're done. And every time when I've deployed and I've come back, I've had to start from scratch again. So you have to have that degree of resiliency to realize that it will work out. You may have to hustle, but it will work out. And I think that that type of entrepreneurial spirit is what keeps a lot of people away from it. It's that uncertainty that you don't know what's going to happen. You like to sit there. A lot of people think that they have this entrepreneurial spirit until they realize, oh my gosh, I don't have a job. I don't have income coming in. What am I going to do? And I think that people who do have that entrepreneurial spirit realize that I can make it happen. I will find a niche to make it happen. And I will find myself in that position here perhaps soon, because I've been on extended active duty in Washington, D.C., and I'll come off my orders most likely in September, and then I will start from scratch again.
I think, that is a true typical story. You mentioned words like resiliency. Clearly, you have to have that. Most people I know who own their own business, you walk away, it's a day without pay, as opposed to I'm getting paid by my employer. I think there is beauty in being a business owner. I always try to teach my own kids, make your own choices, be proactive, because if you're proactive and you fail, which I think a lot of entrepreneurs know this, the rise and fall of successes, at least you're the one that did it. So you can only get mad at yourself and look at where you can, change things, pivot things. And then that's the true entrepreneur, I think, being able to make your own choices and then own those choices.
And I think the other thing, Laura, we talked about our daughters being similar ages and both of them involved in acting and theater. It has allowed me the opportunity that if I need to take a period of time off during the day to go see my daughter do something, I'm there. And as a young person, they don't understand or appreciate that. But as she gets older and she's working for somebody, she's going to understand that we had sacrifices where, you at times, obviously, we could have gone out and gotten a job and made more money. But then the restriction is you only have this set amount of time off. You just can't go and run to go see your daughter's school play. Those are things that are tangible to me and important to me, more so than that understanding of that steady paycheck coming in. And then on the flip side too, because I don't want to sound like a downer, because this is obviously about entrepreneurship, there are great rewards in entrepreneurship as well too. And growing a business to the point where you may be able to sell it, or it can sustain on its own with very limited support from you that provides you even greater freedom to go and do things. So it is a interesting lifestyle, but it's certainly not for everyone.
I totally agree. It's talking about, the children aspect, the child aspect. So my colleague Toy, who usually does these podcasts with me, is not here because she had something come up with her kids. And so understandably, that's wonderful because that comes first. And it's important to realize, what our priorities are. But so, you pivoted a lot in your career. I think I have too. What does that feel like to the rise and fall of it? I know, you'd mentioned you're in between the Navy posts and looking at the next thing with that. What is in the entrepreneurial mindset as you go through what's next?
So you start planning things out earlier. I mean, I know that there's an end date. So I won't use it from where I am, but for viewer or listeners to better understand perhaps where they are, is that you know if a project is coming to a completion. So a lot of the things that I would do would be project-based. And I would know that at this time period, this project and that income is going away. You don't wait until 2 weeks before that is up to start figuring out what you're going to do next, or putting out feelers for other folks that may be interested in your services. So I've already started thinking about that, and we touched on it a little bit with the Exploring West Virginia website, which was something that my wife Natalie and I had thought about years ago. And we actually did put together a 30-minute show about the state, called it Exploring West Virginia. And that has always been like on the back burner, but I think from an entrepreneurial standpoint, you just kind of put that in the back of your mind. You don't put it to rest, and you think about it all the time, and eventually it happens. So I remember years ago thinking, I want to do this, and I need to have a website. And this is probably a way of people may understand, and I hope they do, because I want them to take away with this quick story that you don't wait for perfection to move.
Good point. Very good point.
So I had always thought, I need to build this website up, and then once I do, I can launch it.
Mm-hmm.
And that actually was a weight that kept me from doing the job, because it just seemed so overwhelming. That how am I going to go out and do all of this stuff, build this website, and go live? Because the whole concept of it was an opportunity that people can go to exploringwv.com, see what's out there that would interest them to go and do, and then go do it. And I guess it was about several years ago, I started to realize that's really not the right approach. I need to just go ahead and launch it. And there'll be one story, which there is today. I've been working on my second one because I just launched it about 2 weeks ago.
Congratulations.
And slowly start that process. Mm-hmm. So now my mindset has changed from, no, I don't need to say I have to have it completed, because in that type of website is never completed. It's always adding new content. It's always adding new content.
Yes.
To one that let's have people who have an interest in West Virginia and exploring the places and getting to know the people come with this journey with me. And having that approach really suddenly just took the pressure off of me. And now I think, okay, I have one story. After the end of this week, 2 stories. By the time this podcast airs, maybe there'll be 10 stories, but it's just a progress. And that has helped out tremendously. And the other part is, since I know you touch on technology, when I looked into doing the website initially, gosh, I think I was into Dreamweaver and that process where you would need to have a better understanding of code, to now with WordPress and buying a theme that you're ready to go. I had this site up in a matter of just a couple of days. And the technology to make this happen is so much easier and consumer friendly that I'm able to do it today.
And those are all perfect points, because we talk about that with EntreEd. You know, we're building a membership model and doing all kinds of things. And first of all, it's freeing to release yourself of the perfection, because you're right. I think entrepreneurs are constantly thinking, what's the next thing? So like you said, you banked the Exploring West Virginia concept and website for a few years, and you brought it back at the right time for you. And so it works now. And I think I think the audience today are better at saying, yeah, it's a process. And like you said, go along with me for the adventure of it. And I think because of technology, of course, it's going to be different in 2 months, 5 months, a year, or And that's the excitement of it for you and the audience, is that they're looking forward to what's Erik's next thing. What's he going to be doing this weekend? So I think, yeah, that's all the entrepreneurial spirit. So, you know, we focus on education. And I think one of your bigger successes has been your 8 years in the West Virginia State Senate, and particularly your leadership on the Education Committee. So tell us about what that was like, some of the highs, the lows, some of the concerns, some of the successes, whatever you want to tell me about that, being on that committee and seeing where it goes.
So I actually requested to be on the committee. I felt that, and I still feel today, that education is really the cornerstone of what built our nation. And also being involved in public education, that's where we shine as a nation. And I think that if anybody were to take a step back, you could see where we have difficulties in public education today, but I think that they can be overcome. Now, I will candidly tell you, because I want to be transparent. I mean, I went in, and one of the things that I did advocate, which was unheard of because I'm a Democrat, was charter schools.
Mm-hmm.
But my process really wasn't private charter schools. It was charter schools that were connected and authorized by, in West Virginia, we have county boards of education. So the county had the oversight, but what it would do would say, okay, teachers, you run this school as you see fit. Because one of the things that as a lawmaker you constantly hear is that teachers know best. So I did take it from an entrepreneurial standpoint to say, okay, I'm on board with that. Mm-hmm. They know best. However, results are needed. So you can do this concept, but if after a 5-year period, if the concept is not working, then those teachers can be removed outside to make the changes necessary for that charter school. And that did not go over very well. It wasn't about firing teachers. It was just about understanding and realizing, and I still believe this too, that you may not be a good fit for that school as an educator, but you may be at a better fit for another school as an educator. And then you understand more about the difficulty of what it is like to be an educator too. Mm-hmm. I do agree with them. They are not respected to the degree that they once were. You see things that happen in the news, and this does actually bother me, where a teacher is found to do something inappropriate. Well, then all of a sudden you paint all the teachers like that. But you don't necessarily see that in other professions either. So perfect example.
You paint the school that, too.
Yeah.
And people start rumors that aren't necessary when it actually involves one person, like you're saying.
No, not at all. And at the time that we are recording this, there is an arrest over in Ohio with the Ohio Speaker of the House with bribery. And you're not necessarily labeling everybody in politics as somebody who is accused of doing that, or other professions. When you see a medical professional do something, you're not labeling all doctors or all nurses that way. But we've gotten into a routine in our nation, which I think is wrong, to label all teachers that way. Because I will tell you, I know enough enough educators that go far above what is expected. They are making sure that the classroom, and in particular now when you think about it, about what we're going to be doing in the fall, making sure the classroom is safe. I tell a story that I'm really proud of. One of my sister-in-laws, most of them are all teachers, was in her classroom, and this was probably 2 years ago. One of her children got sick, and as you know, parents send their kids to school sick.
Oh, yeah.
So she went and she was wiping down every single desk and disinfecting it. Mm-hmm. And another teacher said, "Why are you doing that?" And she said, "That's not your job." And her response was, "It is my job to keep these kids in school."
Wow.
Well, that's not part of her job description, but that just shows you her dedication to her students. And the vast majority of teachers do that. And I think we don't give them enough credit for the job that they're doing. Mm-hmm. And I would certainly like to see that change. And that also comes with more pay. But I'm not sure how we get there necessarily. It's not as simple as just simply saying, increase the pay and suddenly the results are going to be better. But we need to do both. We need to increase pay, and we need to also think about how we can make our education system a little bit better. And I know we probably will talk about it, but I think one of the approaches is we do have this mindset in our nation that we educate towards college. And I think we would be better served to have the process be we educate to increased learning that may take us to college, but may also take us to technical school as well too, because you can have a successful career in a technical environment and not go to college. And we're losing sight of that. Not everybody's going to college. So let's focus on the student overall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you've touched on so many things that I totally agree with. I remember that charter school fight. I think our kids were in elementary at the time, and it was, I think, very misunderstood. I think it was seen as a threat. Whereas I look at charter schools, and we've interviewed some fabulous people on this podcast that run charter schools, as just another opportunity. It's a different way of looking at education. It doesn't mean they're not hitting all the benchmarks. It's just a different opportunity for the kids. It's a different type of teacher, as you mentioned. Not everybody is going to fit into every school system. It's like any job. We find our people, we find our tribe, as Seth Godin would say. I have the wonderful experience to do a shout out to Jean Crum, who was a Holtz Elementary teacher for my daughter. And the summer after, coming up to the summer after her third grade experience, she said, "Haley, you love to write and draw. Go do something with it." She wrote a little book and it got published, and she got #1 in a writers competition in West Virginia. So I hail teachers because sometimes that voice is the voice that propels them forward. It's not the parent that they consider as a nag, but it's the teacher saying, "I recognize something in you." And I think that too is most teachers I know go above and beyond to try to recognize every student in a special way and to increase their, experiences. So yeah, what do you, from your experience in the legislature, can you dive a little bit deeper into how, maybe particularly West Virginia, but other nationally as well, what do you think we should be doing? What is the direction, and what are you hearing from West Virginia these days?
So I've been out of that political circle for a while, but some of the thoughts probably still really resonate, at least with me, and I just touched on one. I do think that there needs to be a greater focus on technical training for students. And that can get into the entrepreneurial aspect too, that a student goes through technical training and perhaps it's plumbing or electrician or even auto repair. The thought should really be, part of that training is, one, doing the job, but the second part should be about, let's focus on the business side of it. Mm-hmm. Because not everybody's cracked up to do it, but let's ignite that student to say, you know what, I right now, I just want to go and do the mechanic aspect. I love working with my hands and figuring out how to get things to work. But down the road, I want my own garage. Mm-hmm. And I think that we can really do that and put it into that student's mindset that this is possible. Mm-hmm. And your only limitation is going to be yourself. So I think if you start that process, you do start changing mindsets of people. And I've always said to people that in West Virginia, we consolidated high schools, and most of our high schools are not co-located with the technical school. And you suddenly have this mindset with students who can be very judgmental, that Johnny is leaving after the second period and he's going over to the technical school and he's just not bright enough to stick around here. Mm-hmm. And the reality is that could be the furthest thing from the truth.
And he might be the one kid that understands what he wants in life, as opposed to a lot of high schoolers still trying to figure out who they are.
Yes, and people intellectually mature at different stages in their life. And what you miss when you think that person, that student isn't capable, is go and follow that student. Go over to that class with them and see how they shine in that environment where that student who may be academically going towards college may have difficulty. That has opened up my eyes, because you start thinking about, okay, I am not a very good student when it comes to math, but having the understanding of how to build something, and you're taking mathematical principles there to build something. Mm-hmm. And somebody who maybe is going towards college may not have that mindset to actually see how to build something, but then they see another student who does, and suddenly you're now on a level playing field. It's right. Like, okay, you really know how to do this. I really wish we would do more of that, because I do think the idea that everybody's going to college is not the case.
Right. Particularly in today's world. And I feel like, we talk to folks around the country. There's some amazing makerspace fab labs down to middle school and many high schools. And I think the beauty of those is it piques interest in students. And like you're saying with technical exposure, that's the same thing. You're piquing an interest, as we talk about in entrepreneurship, that may become a passion. And you don't know if it's going to become a passion unless you're exposed to it.
And being exposed is a good example of things that aren't happening today. So because we're focused so heavily on higher education, we have removed arts, which I think is a problem. It is shown that math scores, for instance, are higher when you have students who have musical training.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What's wrong with making sure that all students have a healthy amount of music training or are exposed to the arts? I'm also, and this might go from the Navy side, big on physical education. I think having physical education every day is important. And there are studies that suggest that when students have physical education, they also have better test scores. They also have less tendency to be disruptive in class because you're getting that energy out. But we don't do that anymore. So we have lost part of that. And I think sometimes to move forward, it is acceptable to go backwards and take a look at, well, what's working and why did we change it? So I would love to see us do some of that.
That's interesting. I haven't thought about the looking back. I'm such a think forward, go forward. But you're right. In this compete world that we live in, sometimes the basics get away from us. Had you had entrepreneurship training in your high school or middle school experience, would it have changed how you've done life, how you followed your career path?
Well, I remember having a semester involved in junior achievement.
Okay.
And I don't remember a great deal about it, but I do remember, because that was over 30 some years ago, I think now. There was a degree of setting up a business and what it's like and pricing and things like that. And that was helpful. I think that it was just something that has always interested me in terms of having your own business and that old cliche of being your own boss. Mm-hmm. That was intriguing to me. And it just has stayed with me. And then necessity after 2004 of not having a job, I needed to create something. I could have left West Virginia, but I really didn't want to do that at that point either. Mm-hmm. So it really became the necessity of I need to find something and do something. Mm-hmm. And that's really what brought me to where I am today.
And you mentioned West Virginia. Having raised my kids there, you're right. It can be a difficult economically place to live, but there's so many things outweighing it in terms of where you raise your kids or the quality of life that you have. The opportunity to start a business may be a little bit easier in West Virginia where there's less people doing it. I don't know. But there are a lot of great things about that state.
Well, and I know, for instance, one of the things that I like to do is do spokesperson training with people to train them to work better with the media. That's something that you don't need to do just in West Virginia. And I think if COVID has taught us anything from an entrepreneurial standpoint, is you can conduct business through Zoom calls. You can think outside the box to get things completed. In the Navy organization where I'm currently working, we're spread out around the country. And we are heavily teleworking. So I'm in Charleston, West Virginia, teleworking. Mm-hmm. And you're getting the job done. So I think that anybody who thinks I can't do something because there's a hurdle in front of me needs to think I can do it. I just have to figure out how to get around that hurdle in front of me. Entrepreneurs figure out a way of doing that. And you touched on it too. It doesn't mean success either. It can mean going around that hurdle and failing, getting back up, going to the next hurdle and failing, getting back up to the next hurdle and failing, and then suddenly you succeed. You just have to have that mindset that if you continue doing it, then it will happen. And the other thing too is, and I've learned this, when you are an entrepreneur, while you are selling your craft or your skill set, so much of it also relies on you're selling yourself, and that there's that personal connection that somebody has with you.
That's a good point. We don't often talk about that, but you're exactly right. It's the integrity of who you are and what you believe in. Your passion has to come through. You know?
Correct. And that connection, you want to do business with that person.
Uh-huh.
And because you have that personal connection, you are doing that business with that person, because you could go out and find somebody else to do the training that you want. But there's just something about that person and the way that they are presenting themselves that you want to do business with them. Mm-hmm. And on the flip side, as an entrepreneur, you can also look at somebody and say, I don't really want to do business with that person.
And I have the beauty of saying no. Yeah. So, you know, to touch on quickly, I know you have a lot of different hobbies, and you certainly well traveled. I know photography is one of them. Are we going to see some of that on your Exploring West Virginia site, or tell me what's up for that?
Absolutely, you will. So the story that will be coming out is on kayaking. Took a photograph. I love the photograph I took. You know, I'm an amateur, semi wanting to do a little bit more, and it's from an entrepreneur standpoint, it's not something I want to do as a full-time job, but it's an avenue of creating a certain income stream. Mm-hmm. And I just love the idea of taking a photograph of somebody and letting that person see themselves in a different light. And we all have had that experience where you see a photograph of yourself that you particularly like, and it just makes you feel good. And I love that idea. But I think that when you start off in business, that's why you need to have a diversified portfolio of what you offer. Because you may find that a certain amount of your income stream comes from this area, another from that area. And if you have too much in one area and suddenly the economy tanks or the demand suddenly shrinks, mm-hmm. you have something to fall back on too. Just like investing from.
That's a very good point. I love Seth Godin and his marketing strategies. He talks about the who and the what. And if you don't understand who your audience is and being able as an entrepreneur to pivot, then you're going to have problems. You're right, because nothing's going to keep constantly going up. It's going to have a dive, then it's going to come back up. Tell me, as we're starting to unfortunately wrap up the session here, what would you advise teachers, legislatures, and looking at education moving forward? Particularly, we've got COVID on us and what we're facing this fall and the next spring. What advice could you share?
I would love to see, and this would be a difficult nut to crack, a process where we do reward teachers, but with a pay system that is a little bit more entrepreneurial. And what I mean by that is, in our state, people are paid just the base percentage, whatever the increase is across the board, regardless of what specialty you are. In West Virginia, we lack certified math and science teachers. I'd love to see a pay system that actually rewarded certified math and science teachers, because at the end of the day, having those teachers in the classroom better benefits our students. But we don't see that. And there is a process where, from a political side, it is far more easier to just give a across-the-board pay raise to teachers.
Yeah.
On the education side,
fair thing, I guess people would say.
Yeah, on the education side, it's hard for those organizations to justify to their membership why a math and science teacher is getting a 6% pay raise this year, while an elementary school teacher is getting a 3% pay raise. But my argument has always been, if you took that approach, you may think as an elementary school teacher that you're getting the short end of it. From a short-term perspective, I guess you can look at it and say you may be. But I believe over a period of time, that forces the legislature to put more money into the system for pay raises over time than just a simple 3%. Because eventually you're going to get to the point where now maybe we have a shortage of certified English teachers.
Good point.
So you start doing that, you're going to see pay increase. But I think we have to start thinking in terms of how do we, it's such a complicated, you can't even answer it so in a succinct way, Laura, but it's just a way of We do have to have that investment with qualified teachers and pay them more. But I also think we need to look at our education system. I'm a big believer in year-round education. I think the agrarian system we have set up does not need to continue. You can have the same degree of time off, but at different periods throughout the year. In West Virginia, we have some examples of that. And I've talked to some teachers who were not in favor of it and then suddenly became in favor of it once they've had that experience. So I think it's just a different way we have to start thinking. And it takes educators willing to risk and change the way their jobs are structured. And it takes the legislature a commitment to say we're going to invest the money to do it. And those are difficult political hurdles to overcome.
Mm-hmm. And that goes back to the entrepreneur spirit. You said take a risk, and that's hugely about being an entrepreneur, being willing to go in a different direction, see what happens. So Erik, how would we get in touch with you to continue the conversation? How can our audience reach out, and particularly how can they look up your website?
So they can go to the website and give me suggestions if you want to, but the website is exploringwv.com. You can also go to Instagram to exploringwv, and it's also on Facebook, which is just type in Exploring West Virginia. And then if you wanted to reach out to me, they can email me, and my email address is Erik, ERIK, .wells@wellsmediagroup.com.
Awesome. I already gave Erik a suggestion. My happy place in West Virginia is Fayetteville. So I was all over that when he was telling me he's doing this website. So I know Erik would be open to folks who think, hey, try this. And again, Erik is a very diverse thinker in his background education and in the Senate, and his wife running again for Secretary of State, and daughter moving to New York. So good luck with that one.
We're all busy. But I will say this to wrap it up, is that when you said your suggestion to me, it is important. And I do want suggestions, because I do believe anything you do in life, whether it's you're in a business, you're an educator, collaboration is really important, and being open and willing to admit, one, the road you're going down is not quite working, and be open to suggestions. But when you do that, you get buy-in from people as well too. And once they have that invested interest in you, they do want to see you succeed. Nobody wants to give their time to see somebody fail. I always try to help people out because I want to see them succeed. And I think that generally that is how most people are.
I like that. I like that a lot. Great way to close. Thank you. This has been fun. So folks will hear this podcast soon. And in the meantime, I can't wait to, I have been on the website once. I can't wait to see the story on kayaking.
All right. Take care. Thank you.
Thanks, Erik.